Hi members, it's Nicole from Birth Story Medicine. I wanted to come back and add another piece to the birth story seeds. If you haven't seen the first two videos from the first birth story seed, maybe go back and watch those first, and then you can catch up on birth story seed number 2 then. Birth story seed number 2 is called the seed of promises and expectations. So this seed, like a lot of the other seeds, can be planted during pregnancy, like during birth preparation, or as far back as childhood, and sometimes those little seeds are sort of getting planted all along the way. So the main issue with this particular seed is when any sort of stories, ideas, anecdotes, beliefs about birth are taken like an absolute truth, this can cause issues after birth. So there's a lot of common cliches that you might hear about birth, and these could be things that are perceived as either negative or positive. It depends which way you look at it. So for example, it could be something like giving birth is the most amazing day of your life. And then on the other side of the coin, you could also hear a similar story that says something like giving birth is like one of the hardest and most traumatic days of your life. It could be something like your body's made to give birth. That's a really common one. And then I've also heard the opposite of that, like there's nothing natural about childbirth. It's also common to hear anecdotes about pain. So it could be birth is the most pain you're ever going to experience. Or on the other side of the coin, it could be something like birth doesn't have to be painful. So these are all sort of ideas that you could pick up, even if you don't realize that you are. They can often be unconscious seeds. Often in birth story sessions, this seed is very apparent when someone's done particular kinds of birth preparation or picked up certain kinds of ideas throughout preparing for birth. So I have personal experience with this because my journey as a childbirth educator started as a hypnobirthing instructor, and I noticed things quite early on that I didn't really like about it, but I just noticed how potentially there could be issues with it. So quite commonly with similar types of preparation where there's some sort of idealized, or I would even say fantasy version of birth that's not achievable for most people, these can definitely plant a seed of promises and expectations, these kind of preparations. So the seed gets planted, so during childbirth education. There may have also been some other ideas that are planted earlier on in childhood as well. And then if that person is not able to achieve what they set out to, then that seed that was planted can then grow into upset, disappointment, betrayal, feeling let down, and even trauma. The problem sort of comes about more when people do take things as absolute truths. When we're able to take an idea but still be quite flexible and sort of see a lot of grey areas or nuance in these kind of ideas, it's less of a problem. So, for example, if you look at the idea of your body's designed to give birth, well, there is truth to that, because none of us would be here if that wasn't true. But at the same time, bodies don't always work perfectly in birth or just in general. Now, some of this could be to do with the environment that you're giving birth in. Maybe it wasn't fully supportive of what you were hoping for, and maybe the support team wasn't as supporting you in the way that you needed for your birth to unfold too. So there can be that. But also sometimes, even when all those things are happening, sometimes bodies don't always work perfectly either. So some examples of how seeds can get planted sometimes and how they may influence you as you're preparing to give birth. I recall one time that I had a client who was early pregnant, like she was only probably 5 or 6 weeks pregnant, and we started talking about, what kind of birth do you want? What kind of model of care do you want? And I remember her saying, I probably should just book in for a cesarean because my mother had cesareans and her mother had cesareans, so I think maybe my body doesn't work. And she actually went through like a really, really interesting process of actually realizing that maybe some of the reasons why they ended up with cesareans are not anything genetic or anything like that. And she was able to be a lot more open and flexible to birth, just that maybe it was possible for her to have a vaginal birth. She wasn't necessarily destined to have a cesarean, but that also took a lot of work. And it's probably, also lucky that she came across a lot of supportive people through her pregnancy that made her question that idea, because it would be very easy if that was just reinforced through your pregnancy to just, book in for a cesarean and assume that that's how everything's going to go. But yeah, she did actually end up having 3 vaginal births and just looked at birth quite differently to the rest of her family. There's also another one I know who was told at some point, I don't even know whether it was in pregnancy or before, that her pelvis was quite small. And so you can imagine that idea, if it doesn't get challenged in any way or no one sort of gives you new information, could imagine what you would imagine your body doing if your pelvis is too small in birth. Like you would imagine it not opening up enough and the baby not having enough room to get out. So things like that can be a seed that can cause issues. They may or may not, but they're just potential seeds that can be planted during childhood and in that sort of lead up to giving birth. So if you look back at the first birth story videos that I posted previously in the group, you'll hear a little bit about my first birth story. So some of those seeds also relate to the promises and expectations seeds as well. Like, your body better than anyone else, and a women's bodies are designed to work and give birth. So, for me, after my first birth, when my body didn't work perfectly, then you've got that seed of, well, hey, what happened here? Like, am I broken? Am I flawed in some way? And for me, it definitely did plant a seed of feeling upset and traumatized and betrayed by my body even. So, yeah, it's just a little bit of something to ponder there. Have a think about, did you buy into any particular promises or expectations, or was there any kind of birth preparation you did that you feel like did do this? It's not always a negative. Sometimes when a seed of promises and expectations is planted and your birth does turn out the way that you planned, it actually can cause pride that you achieved that. So it's not always, a seed doesn't always mean a negative thing. But I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, and if you can relate to this seed of promises and expectations, post your comments in the group and let me know. And I'll be back soon with the next birth story seed, which is relationships.